I am live. A new book, a new story, another story by Joan Grant. She was a writer of her farm memories. This is her second novel, and it's entitled Life as Carola. Now, it's actually one of my favorite, I have to say. Joan Grant was a seer. She remembered her past lives, and I have just finished Winged Pharaoh. She was born in England in 1907. Her father was a man of such intellectual brilliance in the fields of mathematics and engineering that he was appointed a Fellow of King's College while still in his 20s. She didn't have much formal education. She enjoyed the after-dinner conversations at her home. She was married to Leslie Grant. She had a daughter with him, but the marriage ended soon after her first book was published. That was an instant bestseller in the UK. Until 1957, she was married to the philosopher and visionary Charles Beatty, and in 1960, Joan married psychiatrist Dennis Kelsey. She was preoccupied with the subject of ethics. To her, the word ethics represented the fundamental and timeless code of attitudes and behaviour towards one another on which the health of the individual and society depends. Here she is, Carola. She is born illegitimately to a lord. I think his name is Griffin. Carola judged people and institutions only as she saw them, through the eyes of a bastard of the Lord of the Griffin in 16th century Italy. This is perhaps particularly noticeable in those chapters which describe her days as a novice in the house of the White Sisters. Let's just start. We are walking through this journey together. This is chapter 1. Daughter of the Griffin. I was born early in the morning of the 4th of May in the year of our Lord 1510. Though I was conceived in the great bed, I opened my new eyes for the first time in the northwest turret of a castle of the house of the Griffin, which lay 2 days' journey from Perugia in the country of Italy. My cradle was of dark carved wood, very old, and my mother used to rock it with her foot while she laid her long thread into smooth stitches. All through my first summer I never saw the sun, except when it shone through the high windows in a clear-cut shaft of light and lit a blue sheen in her black hair. But when the cold weather came, she asked to take me out under the sky, where I could watch the clouds and see the winter trees flaring in the wind. Sometimes she carried me through vast shuttered rooms, where the storm cried in the wide chimneys, and the furniture was blind and shrouded in the dusty gloom, into a long gallery where there were many pictures. She would hold me up to them and talk to the portraits as if they were living people. Often she would begin to cry, and I would feel her tears falling warm and wet on my face. Even when I could run very fast, my mother still had to carry me up the stairs of the turret because they were so very steep and there was nothing to hold on to. There were 2 rooms in our turret, one above the other, and we lived in the top one. The walls were so thick that the embrasures of the 3 high windows were almost like passages leading to the light. I often used to curl up in them, for the windows were too narrow for me to fall out of, and look down at the country far below me. At the bottom of the castle hill there were vineyards and ploughland, and on days of clear air I could hear the voices of the drivers as they shouted to their oxen. The sound was very small and thin because of the distance, and the oxen looked like toys I could pick up in my hand, as if I should have to be small as a grasshopper to ride on them. The privy was in the corner of the room, up 3 little steps. The hole was very big, and I was always afraid of falling down it, like an unwelcome guest down an oubliette, until Mother got the carpenter to make a little wooden seat for me, so that I should feel safe. I did not play there in summer because it was very smelly, and in winter there was a cold draught. But in spring and autumn I used to collect pebbles or horse chestnuts and pretend they were my enemies, whom I had at last brought to justice. Then I dropped them into the privy and heard them go clattering down till they fell into my dungeon. Because my mother was the daughter of Donna Isabella's steward, who had died the year before I was born, she looked after the rich materials that were stored in 4 great chests in the room below ours. Rolls of cut velvet, damask and brocade, stamped cloth of gold, satins and lawn for ruffs, and bundles of black horsehair to stiffen sleeves. She used to embroider with the gold and silver threads and precious stones that were kept in a little cabinet, its drawers inlaid with mother of pearl, whose key she always wore on a chain round her neck. Sometimes, though not often, she took me down there and let me play with the jewels. I loved the blue ones and the green, but the red ones made me think of the dove that had fallen on the parapet after a hawk had plucked out both its eyes. I think I comforted it a little before it died between my hands, but the blood that dripped from its beak onto its breast reminded me of white velvet soon sewn with rubies. Mother often sat all day at her embroidery frame, and I had to play alone. But on other days she would be gay, play hide and seek, or in the spring take me out to the hillside to gather wild iris. From autumn to early summer we were alone in the castle, except for a few servants in the kitchen quarters, and I was free to wander wherever I liked. I used to help in the herb garden when they were gathering the herbs to make cordials and simples, and run races with the kitchen children on the stone terraces where I fed the birds in winter. The great empty castle was a very good place to play in. One room was floored like the long gallery with alternate squares of black and white marble, and when I crossed it, I was always very careful never to step on the black squares. I didn't know how this game started, but it always seemed very important. I could even go into Donna Isabella's own apartments, where the furniture crouched in the shadows like wolves waiting to spring on an unwary traveller, and the mice had grown so bold that if I stood quite still they would creep out of their holes and watch me with their little bright eyes. I had 3 dolls, and my favourite one was a blackamoor that Mother had made for me out of a scrap of velvet. He was dressed as a Negro page with a yellow turban and pantaloons of silk striped in green and mulberry, and he even had shoes with curling points. His eyes were very real, for the craftsman who came to mend one of the inlaid cabinets had made them from a broken piece of mother of pearl. He was called Salim, after the famous Negro page, because I had always loved the story of Salim and made her tell it to me very often. On Sundays, when Mother took me down to the village to hear Mass, I wore a green velvet dress and a skull cap embroidered with wildflowers in brilliant-coloured threads. My hair was a bright sienna red, and Mother rolled it in rags so that it would curl up round my cap. The little damp knobs were very uncomfortable to sleep on, and I often wished I were like the kitchen children whose heads had never seen a comb. When Donna Isabella left her palazzo in Siena and came to the castle for the hot weather, everything was different. I could not understand why she must never see me, and why mother was so frightened of her, but I knew I had to stay in our turret, whose stairs she was too crippled to climb. I was kept almost like a prisoner, and was not allowed to go out of doors except very early in the morning, when all the grand people were still sleeping. It was only after I overheard Maria talking to my mother that I realized Donna Isabella was my grandmother. Maria was the head cook, and I was very fond of her. She was fat and friendly, and always gave me nice things to eat when I went into the kitchen. 3 days after her eldest daughter's baby was born, she took me down to the village to see her. The baby was very small and red, and it cried a lot, but Maria seemed to love it already, though she had only known it for such a short time. While we were walking back to the castle, I asked her, "Why doesn't my grandmother love me as you love your granddaughter?" At first she pretended not to hear me, but I went on asking her until she said, "It is because Donna Isabella is not your real grandmother, or at least your mother is not her daughter-in-law. And a tie of blood is often a tie of hatred, when it has not been knotted by a priest." I said, "I know I'm a bastard." I didn't know what a bastard was, but I'd heard people say it. I was one of them, and I knew it was caused by having a mother who wasn't married. But I can't see what difference it makes. As far as I can see, I'm just the same as your children, and I know they aren't bastards because I asked them. Maria didn't say anything. I thought she was offended, so I added, "In the long gallery there are 2 portraits of men of the house of Griffin who were bastards, and no one seems to be ashamed of them. That is quite different. You see, their mothers were married, and the father of one of them became a cardinal, and anyway, it all happened a long time ago. I think it is very silly and unfair. Next time Donna Isabella comes to the castle, I shall go and ask her why she hates me, and when she sees I'm only an ordinary little girl, she may like me after all. If you do that, you and your mother will be turned out of the castle. She will send you as far away from here to some horrible place where you will never have enough to eat, and not even a roof to shelter you. There is no place in Donna Isabella's heart where kindliness can hope to find a lodging." "Why is she so cruel?" "She is of the true line of the Griffin, not only by marriage, but by blood, for she married her first cousin. I have often wondered by what strange chance your father, Orlando, was born into this eagle's nest. Have you ever heard the stories that the servants whisper below the creaking of the turning spits? How Guido, whose portrait hangs at the end of the long gallery, drank of viper's broth when he was young to make him wily as a serpent? He snatched a bride from the Duchy of Millard. He poisoned her brother while he was his guest, and then took her as though he picked up a gauge that challenged him to show his power. Some say he died a traitor's death, but I have heard that it was his wife, a girl turned to a bitter woman, who gave him the toast to drink that he heard answered by the keeper of the gates of hell. Does my mother hate Donna Isabella as you do? I have heard her say, the day she dies the summer trees will all put forth their buds, though it be winter, to show how they rejoice that she will never walk the path they shade again. After this, in my imagination, Donna Isabella became fabulous as a dragon. I felt that she might fly past my window with a beating of heavy feathers, leathern wings, as though the griffin on the banner had flown down from the roof. I had always made up stories to myself while I was in bed at night, but they had been happy stories about the knights and princesses in the tapestries on the walls of the banqueting hall. I had joined with them in their remote green world, ridden pillions behind the man in armour, while his white horse galloped through the flowery thickets to the castle in the distance, where mother and I lived with a joyous company, and being a bastard didn't matter at all. I also made up stories with dragons in them, very large, fierce dragons who ate all the woodcutters in the forest until I, as a young knight in golden armour, slew them in the single combat. Now I began to weave stories in which my mother and I were imprisoned in a castle by an ogre. The ogre was very tall, but I made him too tall to get up the stairs to my room, so that I was safe from him when I was in bed. He used to stride across the countryside, plucking up cottages as if they were mushrooms, and he never ate anything but human flesh. He was so huge that he could eat a company of soldiers at one bite, and while he was munching them, their arms and legs stuck out between his pointed teeth like wisps of hay stick out of the mouth of a browsing donkey. Then I decided that Donna Isabella was more frightening than any ogre I could imagine, so I changed him into a female ogre and gave him a face like I thought hers must be. Mother said all ogres were men, but I told her that even ogres must have mothers, or they would die when they were baby ogres. Mother always said that when Orlando came back, everything would be different. When Donna Isabella was away, she used to take me to see the pictures of him that hung in the apartments on the far side of the castle. It had been painted before I was born, when I was only 15, and it showed him standing against a dark and windy sky with his hand on the collar of a great boat hound. Sometimes I used to go there alone and ask him so hard that it was like praying to come home to us very quickly. So I finish here with the first chapter. The next chapter is entitled Fiesta. Oh, it's hot.